Hi, thank you so much for clicking on this video. I'm Shelby and welcome to Shelby Reads. I'm a femme lesbian and I've been with my beautiful, wonderful butch wife for 12 years, but we've been married for 5. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to hear more about LGBT, but most specifically, typically, sapphic book. Happy Pride Month, everybody. For Pride Month this year, I wanted to make a video specifically about nonfiction books you should be reading. These are basically my nonfiction recommendations for Pride. This will be primarily much more lesbian focused because I am a lesbian, but I have some that touch upon other facets of the community as well. We're going to be starting with books I have read and then moving on to books that I want to read that I have not been able to read yet, because it's not just recommendations of things that I have read. I think we should all be reading about queer history no matter what that history is. We will be starting this off with Surpassing the Love of Men, which is also titled Surpassing the Love of Men, Romantic Friendship, and the Love Between Women from the Renaissance to the Present. The present meant the 80s, that's when this was published, and this is by Lillian Faderman. Drawing on a rich variety of sources, some never before published, Lillian Faderman has constructed a fascinating cultural history of women's passionate friendships with each other. Literature ranging from Casanova and Henry James to Ladies' Home Journal and Adrienne Rich, trial records, love letters, and pornography, and the proclamations of experts across the centuries vividly illustrate the changing status and patterns of romantic friendship. Faderman explores the elusive relation between female same-sex love and the continually shifting theories of female sexuality. She shows, too, how nascent feminist values have always played a role in women's passions for each other and in men's reactions to them, from ridicule to admiration to revulsion. Surpassing the Love of Men is a quietly revolutionary book that brings together forgotten and ignored strands of history in an unexpected new synthesis. For some, it will excite intense controversy, but for many readers, it will awaken a heretofore unrecognized perception of its rightness. No one who reads it, man or woman, will finish it with his or her sensibilities unchanged. So this book and the next book I'm going to be talking about pretty much, in my opinion, go together. You should read one and then the other. So you should read this one first. This one kind of takes the more historian point of view from the time it was published, of asserting that there was no way that sexual relationships between women could have happened during these romantic friendships, at least not in the way we imagine them, and that women would have had no real understanding that they themselves were lesbians or different, or something was up with them that was like not acceptable. And it's because this asserts that it was acceptable during this time period overall. Be more romantic with your friends, to kiss, to hug, to do that kind of stuff, to write really intense romantic letters. And there is some mention of some of the laws that really affected women who were interested in other women, such as dressing up as a man, like cross-dressing, or being like a female husband or whatever, and or using phallic objects on another woman. Those were the things that were really criminalized and could get you murdered, could get you killed by the state or by people around you. And I think people often forget that because they know about the sodomy laws, but they don't know about the other laws were punishing lesbians and queer women as a whole. I think that this book is a great place to start, but I do not think it is a comprehensive guide. I do not think it explores the idea enough of, what if our perception is only what perception we have left? What if it has been censored out? Or what if women were censoring themselves to avoid persecution? So I do think that this is a worthwhile read. At the same time, I think you need to keep that in the back of your head. And that's why I'm going to bring us to the next book. We're now going to talk about Passions Between Women, British Lesbian Culture from 1668 to 1801 by Emma Donoghue. Now, this book has a much more comprehensive idea of like, well, what if they were sexual? What if they were up in each other's business? And there's a lot of refuting of Surpassing the Love of Men done in this book, to the point I was like, damn, she's taking shots. I do want to touch upon some of the sections in this book because I do feel that it is very important to read this book after you've read that book to kind of get a better idea of the fuller picture. This was also written in the 90s, so there was more information that could come out and could be shared with everybody. The first section is female, slur that we're not going to say, here it is. And this was a lot more, I'm assuming, about like the idea of intersex people, or honestly, it had a lot to do with the idea of like largened specific genitalia. And it's very interesting to read while also horrifying at the same time. Not because intersex people are horrifying, but because the people who are criminalizing this is horrifying. I want to make sure that I'm being 100% clear. Okay. The next section is about female husbands, which I find incredibly fascinating, and I wish that there were more romance books about this. But it was people who were assigned female at birth, pretending to be men, passing as men, living their lives as men. And it's not just rich people who were doing this. There were a lot of working class people who did this, and they were married to women, and they were with women. women. And there are reports of this, and unfortunately a lot of our reports of this, at least as far as this book goes, I don't know about the newer books, but as far as this book goes, was about people who were unsuccessful, or about people who got turned in, or who tried to do this like serially and it just didn't work. But it is still incredibly interesting. The next section is the breeches part, which is about cross-dressing in theater in particular, and it really goes over how women could get away more with cross-dressing if they were actresses and they were doing like breeches parts or whatever, and it was like a socially acceptable way, which is very interesting. But there was also a criminalization of cross-dressing overall that is also touched upon. Again, this is mostly towards Britain, so it's a little difficult to say that this was overwhelmingly what it would be like everywhere, but it is a good snapshot into some of the ideas. There is then a section that encompasses not only romantic friendship but spinsterhood, and I think that that is also important. There is the idea of like sister souls and like the truest friendships and that kind of stuff, but also like there are literary references in all of these, which is very fascinating. Then there is like a couple of sections that are definitely about like group activities and communities such as nunneries, like the convent. And the last part also talks a bit about Sappho and Sapphic tradition. Again, this is not like a complete guide. This is very focused on Britain, obviously, but I do think that this read is a very good read to have after Surpassing the Love of Men, because it refutes a lot of it. It argues with a lot of it. It says, well, how do we know this wasn't more sexual than what we're making it out to be? And I would highly recommend this book. I really enjoyed it. It was quite short, and I feel though, even though that this is a very academic book, that it is easily readable to regular people. And Emma Donoghue in her introduction said that she worked hard to make it like have all the sources for the academic side, but also make it readable to people who are not in the academic environment. I highly recommend this book. The next book is called Outlaw Marriages, The Hidden Histories of 15 Extraordinary Same-Sex Couples by Rodger, Streitmatte. I read this on ebook not that long ago. This really does go through people who basically had marriages before it was even legal to be doing so. I learned a lot about Greta Garbo and her partner, which was very incredibly interesting. There are a lot of people in this one. Obviously, it says 15. I think that this is quite a good read, and it shows that people had the idea and the dedication to try to be married to one another even before, like long before, it was considered even legally possible. And I do think that this is a very good read if you're interested in learning about real historical people who went through kind of oppression, but also found a way to make a life together without, you know, a lot of them were in the closet. Some of them weren't, but a lot of them were. So it's a very interesting read, and I do recommend it. I thought it was quite enjoyable. Next, we have the Lavender Scare, the Cold War Persecution of Lesbians and Gays in the Federal Government by David K. Johnson. I read this book, and this book was incredibly interesting, and I think it is a must read, especially with the political climate that we have right now. This book goes over how in the era of McCarthyism, with like the Red Scare and things like that, gays and lesbians who were working in the federal government because of the New Deal were persecuted simply for being gay and for being lesbians by people in the government who wanted to find a scapegoat for things, who wanted to oppress people further. And this book was quite difficult to read, not only because it is academic, but because the things that happened are quite sad and led to a lot of people harming themselves or self-unaliving themselves. And I wish I could say it, but I'm scared of YouTube. But it's very important, and it was a very dangerous and terrible time. And I feel like it kind of mirrors now how there is still an environment of scapegoating trans people specifically right now. So when my fellow like gay, lesbian people, you know, monosexual people try to act like trans people have nothing to do with us, I think that that is not only offensive, but it's inaccurate. If it can happen to us, which it did, and it's happening to them, what's to say it won't affect all of us? And typically what affects trans people will also deeply affect butch women, like butch cis women, and also other butch identities within butch. And it is horrific that the government feels comfortable persecuting its own citizens for things like this. And I think that it's a very important read because they did do it, they are doing it, and they will do it again. And it is up to us to work together to fight this horrific thing that the government keeps doing to us. The next book I want to talk about is Hijab Butch Blues, a memoir by Lamyah H. This book is a very good book, and it is a memoir about Lamyah, who is born in Southeast Asia, moves to the Middle East, and then eventually comes to go to college in the United States. And it also talks a lot about her conflicts with faith and religion and her own butch identity. I really deeply enjoyed this book, and I think that you will too. I think having firsthand accounts of people and people of many different cultures is very important so that we can have a better understanding of our own queer community and our own queer culture. So I highly recommend this book. I really enjoyed it. Next, I would like to talk about a book that I can never stop talking about after reading it recently, The Persistent Desire, the Femme-Butch Reader, which was edited by Joan Nestle. This book is a collection of short stories and essays and articles and poems from femme and butch people, and this was created in the 90s. This book really touched me in a way that a nonfiction hasn't in a long time, but also I haven't cried at a book since I read Harrow the Ninth, which was a couple years ago. This book made me feel so much less alone and so very seen, and it's very interesting to me how the discourse around butch femme relationships are cyclical, and how the kind of 70s lesbian feminism that made butch and femme not only unacceptable but unenlightened and duped. Like, we are duped by the patriarchy, and of course butches want what men have, and of course femmes aren't even really gay, they're just pretending, and if they're not, they don't know what they really want, they can't possibly know, and like they're emulating heterosexual culture and heterosexual values and relationships, and that's just not true. It's simply not true. It's quite disgusting that we keep having the same cyclical arguments in the queer community, and we are not allowing people to have their own agency and their own thoughts and their own voices, and we're being very judgmental about these things. But if you really want to know more about the butch and femme dynamic, if you are either interested in our history or you are interested in feeling more connected with these specific roles and labels, I would highly recommend reading this. I think it is very important that we come together and try to understand each other as best as we possibly can, because I do understand people who reiterate the kind of tired, sad, and gross arguments of lesbian feminism. I do. But at the same time, I feel that they're very basic and they ignore the nuances of gender expression, relationships, autonomy. I think that they don't understand, and they're not looking to understand. So with that being said, I really hope that you read this book. You can get a free PDF. That's what I did. It is a very difficult book to get a physical copy of. I think that it's a really important read, and I hope all of you try to read it this Pride Month. Next, we have This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson. This book is being consistently challenged in schools. It is targeted towards YA, a much younger audience. So I do not have the revised version, which I do believe is part of the problem, because obviously Juno has other things going on, now. I will say that this knows a lot more about gay men relationships, because Juno used to identify as like a cis gay man, and it also knows more about like trans identity than it does about lesbians and butchness and femmes and like other identities such as studs and masks and like all the different ones. It doesn't know a lot about lesbianism. It doesn't know about a lot about it, and it firmly admits that in one of the sections. But I do think that there's nothing wrong with this book, and I do think it is a good place for younger people to start. And I also think that we need to support LGBT books that are in danger of being banned, because they are trying to ban them for a reason. They are trying to hide a lot of information that could make people find themselves more easily, and they are on a persecution kick yet again. Not that they ever really stopped, but it's ramping back up and it's worse. So I do believe that we should support this book, and I do recommend this for Pride Month. Even if you don't get everything you think you could out of it, I still think it's interesting to read. So even you, like me, can be like, why is this being challenged? Really stupid that it is. Next, I have The Stonewall Reader, which was edited by the New York Public Library. Now, this takes a lot of articles from before Stonewall, during Stonewall, and after Stonewall, and is a lot of first-hand accounts, different articles, different pieces from people's books and such. This is a very good read, especially if you're trying to understand the culture that not only before Stonewall, but during and after, that kind of led to all this stuff and led to the kickoff of the gay rights movement. And honestly, Stonewall is a story of people having had enough of people being assaulted and brutalized and arred by police, our names being printed in the paper so that we couldn't be hired or that we would get fired, so that people would know who we were. This is a very important read, and I think it's quite short. So I think if you're going to pick one, this is one of the ones you should probably pick, because remember, queerness is resistance. We had pride as a protest, and now we must continue on the tradition and continue to do that. Next is one that I don't see recommended too often, but is yours cruelly, Elvira by Cassandra Peterson. Elvira is a horror icon who did like a show showing oftentimes old crappy horror movies, and Elvira's character and personality were like larger than life. But this is her memoir, and it talks about when she was a minor in the 70s and they were letting her do ungodly things that you should never allow a child to be doing. And eventually this book reveals that Cassandra Peterson herself, while being, you know, immersed in a lot of gay culture, especially earlier on, figures out that she herself is queer also, and she has been in a relationship with a woman for a very long time. I personally found this memoir to be fun and informative and just a really fun and easy read, and also seeing someone come into their queerness later in life is always like a beautiful, wonderful thing. I would recommend this if you're a horror fan like I am, and if you're into like older stuff and learning more about different time periods. There is mentions of essay and other things of the like, so please keep that in mind before you read this book. Next is Wrestling with God and Men, Homosexuality in the Jewish Tradition. This is by Rabbi Stephen Greenberg. This is a very good book if you want to specifically know how Orthodox Jewish people think about homosexuality and the readings and the rationales, and this rabbi questions those and kind of argues in a different way. And one of the reasons why I have been considering converting to Judaism for quite a long time, and I just don't have the time at the moment, is because of the tradition of being able to argue with each other and to come to your own conclusions and to read the text and to make up your own minds and to think about things in a very specific way. I think that this book encompasses a lot of that and a lot of the arguing and the thought and the difference. This book came out in the 90s, so there were some very specific arguments and other things, and the 90s was very different from now, obviously, but I really enjoyed this book. It was kind of a difficult read, I'm not going to lie. The other thing I wish to tell you about this book is that this mostly primarily focuses on gay men and like sodomites, basically. There is not a lot about lesbians because there really aren't any Jewish laws about lesbians. It is just kind of deeply culturally frowned upon depending on what part of Judaism you are in. Again, this is all very dependent on community and rabbi and lots of other things and like individual people. Obviously, Jewish people are not a monolith and we should not pretend that they are. But I am saying that this is very, very focused on not only men, but also Orthodox Judaism. But if you're interested in learning more about like religion and homosexuality, I would say that this is a very good read, especially for Judaism. It can give you some textual arguments that people will make and kind of like different ways of thinking about them and coming to your own conclusions. If any of these get me kicked off of YouTube, it's going to be this one. This is the Whole Lesbian Sex Book, a passionate guide for all of us. This came out in the 90s also, and I got this on Thrift Books. I feel that this was quite progressive for the time period it came out in, and I actually found it quite helpful in a lot of different parts, and there's a lot of very interesting and good explanations in my opinion. If you're interested in reading more about like lesbian sex practices and, you know, some ideas and some like different ideas about kink and other things that can intertwine with the community, I think that this is a very interesting read, and I think that it takes into account like trauma and other such things, and I think that it's a good read overall. Now I'm going to talk about books I have not read and just kind of give a basic synopsis and also why I want to read them. I am planning to read them probably not this month, but within this year or next year. So I'm so excited I got this one. If you saw my previous video, this is Dagger on Butch Women. This is a lot of essays and stories and poems about butches and by people who love butches, and there's some very nice photography and other things in here. This is quite an expensive book and it is hard to get, but you can find a PDF quite easily for free online. I was able to do that. I just like to collect these, and so it was important to me to have a copy. Next is Zami, A New Spelling of My Name by Audre Lorde. From what I understand about this, this isn't like completely nonfiction, but it kind of is also like there's memories and other things in here, and this is a lot about being Black and gay and other things, like a lot of different life experiences. Audre Lorde is a very popular and well-known Black lesbian feminist, and I had not read any of her writings, and I'm going to change that for sure very soon because I bought this. I'm so excited. I really wanted this specific cover because I really like it. But yeah, I'm very excited to read this one. Next is Queer Theory and the Jewish Question. Again, I'm very interested in Judaism and queerness because I am still considering converting to Judaism. And I have a lot of thoughts, and I would like to talk to other people about it, but I am trying to wait till I move and I'm more secured and don't have to work 2 jobs anymore. So I am just doing a lot of reading, and I'm very excited to read this one. This one has been on my list for a little bit. I'm quite excited to read it, and I really do like, even if there are Jewish people who find homosexuality to be wrong and wrong by the Torah, there are also a lot of people who don't agree. And I think that that's really cool. And I think that it's nice that you can argue and disagree in a religion and still somehow build a community together. I think that's really beautiful. The next I have on ebook I just bought, it's Making History, The Struggle for Gay and Lesbian Equal Rights from 1945 to 1990, an Oral History by Eric Marcus. I've not read this one yet. I got this one on like one of the ebook things that show me cheap ebooks, and I was quite excited because I do like to have like different history books and different takes and different things to look at. So I am excited to read this. I'm not exactly sure exactly all the things it entails or how comprehensive it is, but if you guys want a review, I can get back to you after I finally read this. A book that my wife has on ebook but that I do not have is In the Dream House. I know that it's a memoir and it's about an abusive LGBT relationship. I do think it is important that we discuss and interact with all parts of the community, even parts that seem harmful and not good. The parts that might be hard to talk about because we're people and people can often end up in abusive or harmful relationships. And I think it's very important that we are open and we discuss this. The next one I want to talk about is Inseparable Desire Between Women in Literature by Emma Donoghue. I find that Emma Donoghue is very easy to understand for a layperson who might not necessarily be entrenched in academia, which I no longer am. I haven't been in college in a couple years now. I'm also looking forward to reading more about desire between women that she's found in more passages of other literature that are older, and I think with more research we will find more and more, and it will get more interesting. I am excited to read more from Emma Donoghue. I think that she does a good job encapsulating a lot of the things that were going on while still being accessible to a normal person. The next book I want to read is The Bars Are Ours, Histories and Cultures of Gay Bars in America, 1960 and After. I'm very excited to read about this because I specifically want to read about lesbian bar culture from this time period because butch femme was very alive and well and very much the predominant idea. I feel even if the bars continue to die out and it seems like we might not have a good opportunity for community, I think we could still look to the bars not only for our history, but to look forward to find new ways to make community. And maybe, yeah, we should get rid of some of the communities that are surrounded with drugs and alcohol and drinking. I'm not saying we should get rid of all of them. I don't think that, and I really hope we continue to preserve lesbian bars and gay bars specifically. But I do think we need other ways to make community because I personally don't drink much, and if I went to a bar, it's not really for me. And also I'm very married. A lot of the bars, at least right now, maybe not historically, but now, about dating, it's about finding people. And it's not so much about finding community. And I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging our history, but also maybe learning from it, you know? Speaking of learning from history, I really want to read Imagining Queer Methods. This is one of the books that talks about our strategies for queer revolution almost. Not even revolution, but just gaining equal rights and working hard to, I don't know, like, I want to know the methods of how we successfully got rights for ourselves and how we can continue to use those methods, because a lot of our queer elders are passing away now or passed away in the HIV and AIDS crisis. And I think it's very important that we figure out ways to help not only ourselves but others when we can, and the intersecting communities. I think that we need to think more about why we were fighting for this to begin with and what else we need to fight for. That also leads to the next one that I would really like to read, called That's Revolting: Queer Strategies for Resisting Assimilation. I do think that we have spent too much time and energy on trying to focus on assimilating when we all know that these people don't want to accept us and they never will. Now, I do feel that there is a lot of acceptability politics running wild in the LGBT community because I fear that some of the younger people think that if we are better at assimilating, if we are better at blending in, if we try harder to emulate straight people in straight life, that they will leave us alone, that they will just let us have our rights and leave us alone. And we all know that's not true. We all know it's not true because we've seen it. I know so many people who have just been living quiet married lives, my wife and myself included, of course, and they do not see us as equals. They do not see us as people. And I think the misfocus we had was unfortunately on trying to assimilate and trying to be part of straight culture when really we need to work harder on dismantling it, on refusing to assimilate, on demanding our rights, because that's what got us our rights. They did not give them to us. They're the ones who took them away. and then we demanded them back and we got them back. So I do want to know more about the activism part of it, because I feel like myself, I'm 31, but myself and other younger queer people, we don't necessarily know how we got here, down to the methods, down to the actual like actionable steps that it would take, you know, to just get to where we were with gay marriage being legal. But we need to focus harder, and we need to use some of those methods to get better rights for our trans brothers and sisters. And I think that's what you're going to notice is some of these ones that I really want to read. They are all kind of part of that, of the trying to fight back, trying to figure out how we push forward from where we are now, which is clearly not a great place, into a much better place in the future. This one I just saw in Thrift Books and I really wanted to. It is called Sister and Brother, Lesbians and Gay Men Write About Their Lives Together. Now, we obviously know a lot about lavender marriages from, you know, way back when and all that kind of stuff, but sometimes I feel like a distinct lack of solidarity with gay men sometimes. And it's not because I want to, but it's because a lot of gay men, not all of them, but a lot of them can still be misogynistic, and they think because they're not attracted to us that they're not being misogynistic, but that's not necessarily true. I do feel that some gay men need to unpack that. But I do know that we had rich solidarity and rich lives together before, and I really want to try and find a way back to that and to find community again with all of each other in a way that is very important. I would like to remind everyone during this Pride Month also that lesbians were the ones helping gay men in the HIV and AIDS crisis, and that is one of the reasons why the L was put in front. I'm not trying to claim credit for that, obviously. I was a baby, if I was alive at all, for some of that. But I do just think that, like, we need to acknowledge that there's kind of a rift now and we might have to repair it. Another one about activism that I would like to read is called Information Activism, a queer history of lesbian media technologies. I don't know, that just sounded so fascinating to me. Like, I can't remember where I heard it from. Oh my god, I heard about it from a lesbian bookstore TikToker. If I can find her, I will put that up here. And that bookstore is actually not terribly far from me. I'm in New Hampshire. They're in Massachusetts. It feels far to me though because of like time to drive and all that. But like realistically, it's not that far. I think there's probably a lot of great information that I don't know yet, and I love learning. That's why I read. Next, I want to read Trans Liberation Beyond Pink and Blue. This one is by Leslie Feinberg. I think Leslie Feinberg was an amazing activist, and I do like reading a lot of their works. So this is just one I have because I really want to read and learn about that as well. Another one I really want to read is Female Husbands. Again, I talked about this briefly, especially with Passions Between Women and also Surpassing the Love of Men. I think the Female Husbands is an incredibly interesting topic that not a lot of people have dived into. So this 2020 book that is exploring this in more depth, I'm super excited to read. I'm very fascinated. I honestly kind of want to write a romance book about a female husband, but I don't know if anyone will be that interested. But let me know, I guess. The next one I want to read is Boots of Leather, Slippers of Gold, The History of the Lesbian Community. It is particularly a look over the years of a lesbian community in Buffalo, New York. Again, it's more about butch femme culture and lesbian culture in general, but it's actually from actual real life people instead of just theory and ideas. And that's why I really want to read it. I really want to get even more about butch femme culture, and I would really like to feel less alone. It's hard when sometimes the only people you're connecting with are on the internet, and I would just like to see more about the people who came before me, you know? The next one I would like to read is Black, White, and Jewish, Autobiography of a Shifting Self. This is by Alice Walker's daughter. I feel terrible for the crazy lesbian drama that befell her. I hope she's doing okay. But I really did like Alice Walker's book, and so I was looking more into Alice Walker's history, and then I found the whole mess between her daughter, and Tracy Chapman, and I couldn't look away, and I really do want to know more about Alice Walker's daughter. The next one I would like to read is The Life of Stormé Laforie. My brain, I took French, so my brain wants to say it in French, but then I'm trying to say it with like an American accent, and it's driving me crazy. I'm so sorry. The Rosa Parks of the LGBT plus community. I don't think that's a good title, personally. I think Stormy is just Stormy, but whatever. Stormy was a butch lesbian who was at Stonewall and was directly involved with the riot that took place. This is a very short book, but I would like to read it. I don't feel like there's as much information on her as there should be. I would also like to read Black, Queer, Southern Woman and Oral History. This is a obviously queer Black book. I have been having a hard time finding a copy of it that isn't very expensive, but I am going to keep trying because I do want to diversify my reading and I want to know more about Black queer history as well. We only have 2 more, we can make it. I would also like to read Native Country of the Heart, a memoir. It is about a Native American queer person. Again, I really think we should be trying to diversify our reading as much as possible and to learn about other histories, because white queer history isn't necessarily the same as other groups' queer history. And the last book that I would really like to read is Queer Literature in the Sinosphere. Now, this is specifically about Chinese queer culture and queerness within Chinese literature, and I think that it looks very fascinating. Again, this book is very expensive and very difficult to get a hold of, so it's very hard to get some of these books, but I do want to get it so I can read it, and I would love to do a review at some point if you guys would ever be interested. Please let me know down below what you guys are going to be reading for Pride Month as far as nonfiction. I would really love to have some more suggestions, particularly about butch femme culture, or really about any of the things that I've talked about today. I think that we have so much to talk about and so much to go back to as far as our history and learning from it so that we can get through this incredibly tough time. Because if our forefathers of queerness, so to speak, did it, then we can do it too. We have even more access to information, even more access to technology, even more access to potential community, and we should be using it so that we can forge a new path together, and so that we can figure out how to end our own oppression by taking our rights, but by any means necessary. We should be able to take our rights back if that's what it takes. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this was a little bit longer than you probably thought it would be, but I really hope you enjoyed it. I really look forward to hearing about what you guys are all reading for Pride Month. I hope you guys have like the most beautiful month, and I hope to hear about all your recommendations in the comments below. So until next time, bye!